Welcome and thank you for joining us. My guest today is Dr. Lindsay Zulaga, Chief Data Scientist at HireVue. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Drew. Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to start out talking about kind of this intersection between hiring practices in the federal government and technology. So what do you see as the role of technology in helping agencies achieve some of the outlines of the president's management agenda and the Biden administration's goals for the federal workforce overall?
Yeah, the Biden-Harris management agenda is really focused on, um, giving Americans equity, dignity, and accountability. So a lot of the hiring technologies that are being developed or have been developed recently are very aligned with that. They're really focused on speed and fairness, as well as quality of hire or quality of kind of person job match, right? Which I think has a lot to do with dignity. Um, So, there's about 1.6 jobs per person looking. So really all organizations have to move fast to attract the top talent. And so when you're looking for specific competencies and attributes, it's important to structure the hiring process around that. So we implement a highly structured process that focuses on skills and competencies rather than just, degrees from a certain school or your GPA, which are measures that have been used traditionally that really don't show a lot of correlation with job performance. But when we focus on skills and competencies, we see not only an increase in that kind of fit of the quality of hire, the job fit for the person, but an increase in overall diversity of hires as well. And so using structure is a great thing, and it's more fair for candidates, but also kind of combining that with flexibility for the candidates. So candidates do complete a lot of the hiring process on their own time, often on their phone, when they have kind of these tools to interact with. And that opens up the funnel for a wider range of applicants as well.
No, that totally makes sense. And I think, skills-based hiring is something that the federal government has been trying to look at more. Also, the speed thing that really spoke to me as well. And just at the end of the day, trying to get that high quality candidate into the door. So those all make sense. And, I know that there's also broader challenges in employment nationwide right now. There's some ongoing labor shortages, especially in fields like cybersecurity. So, in your perspective, how can agencies kind of position themselves to compete with the private sector or other employers to get those really high quality candidates in the door in that more challenging environment? Do you have any recommendations there?
Yeah, I mean, competing with the private sector does require, a modern approach and being very responsive to candidates, because now that's become the expectation. So I mentioned this kind of flexibility and always on communication, using things like chatbots and text messaging, on-demand interviews, and automated assessments. And so about half of the interactions on the HireVue platform take place outside of regular business hours, which shows a lot of flexibility. Candidates don't have to take work off to come into an interview, especially early on in the hiring funnel. They get that flexibility and that speed through a lot of automation. We've also found that encouragement and feedback make a big difference in the candidate experience and their willingness to consider you as an employer. So as an employer, you have a brand to protect. You want people to get excited about working there. One thing we found is that offering candidates what we call an insights report after they take an assessment, to tell them about their performance and areas they might want to work on is really popular with candidates, because it gives them something in exchange for their time. So even if they're not selected for that job, at least it was a beneficial experience. And I think candidates are coming to expect that more and more.
No, absolutely. And I think, that sort of thing carries through to the employee experience overall, right? It's in hiring, but it's also in this whole employee life cycle that you have. And you want to keep employees, engaged and satisfied. And definitely that, that tracks with what you just said. And, another area that I kind of wanted to talk about related to technology is AI. And I know that, we're seeing increasing oversight from the Biden administration when it comes to AI. There's new regulations and recommendations, and it can get a little bit complicated. But how can agencies and vendors ensure that the use of AI is fair and equitable in these, in this kind of developing world of hiring and technology that comes with that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting active space, and there's a lot of regulations being discussed generally about AI, and then kind of on a case by case basis for kind of depending on what you're using it for, which I think we're going to have to get down to that level of detail eventually, because AI is really broad and it's used in many technologies, so it's really hard to regulate it as a general thing. But vendors really have to be dedicated to keeping up with everything that's going on and have resources dedicated to that. So you've got local, state, federal, global laws, and there's going to be a patchwork of things to comply with. So that is a lot of work. We, as kind of a pioneer in this field, we have been a voice in many of those conversations as laws are being formed and kind of bringing in our experience, right? A lot of people writing the laws haven't worked in this space, but to give them kind of a real idea of what it's like, for example, we have customers that have hundreds or thousands of candidates for every open role. That's a reality that a lot of people don't necessarily realize. So there has to be automation, and there has to be, fair ways of evaluating candidates when humans can't necessarily do that. And humans obviously have their own biases, which has been really well studied. So we've been kind of leading from the front from very early on in our journey and establishing best practices in the hiring space specifically, which has made the compliance to like the New York law, for example, really straightforward for us. Like we've been performing third-party audits for years. And I would say, I think we're gonna see a lot of laws that are more codified, like New York, where there's a lot more specificity. There is, some people don't realize as well that there are existing laws already around hiring, for example, and using AI does not give you a free pass to break those laws. So, as a data scientist, I feel very lucky to be in a space where those exist, because a lot of data scientists are working on newer technologies that don't have any basis. But for decades and decades, people have been assessing candidates for jobs. So whether it's some machine learning algorithm or it's a multiple choice pencil paper test, there are standards around how you look at group differences between demographic groups, or what we call adverse impact. Just like any powerful tool, AI can be used for good or bad. So like, as we've all heard, without proper oversight, AI systems can mimic bias and exacerbate bias. But if care is taken, they can also work against human bias that has really plagued hiring for historically. So, that's what's exciting to me is I think with a lot of these systems, if we have, proper legislation, and understanding of the power here, we can really use these systems with fairness in mind, to optimize, and that process and make sure we really minimize adverse impact for underrepresented candidates.
No, thank you. And before we wrap up here, I did want to touch back to one thing you said early on. You talked about we were talking a little bit about the applicant experience, and you mentioned that I believe it was 1.6 jobs are available right now per job applicant. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've heard from applicants and their experience with the hiring process with agencies? Are there any pain points or ways to kind of make that experience better as a whole?
Yeah, I think, and probably not just with agencies, but with a lot of the private sector as well. It's speed. So, getting in and moving quickly through the funnel, a lot of times, jobs are, they don't hear back in time, or they feel like, I don't know if my application was really evaluated or what happened. I just didn't hear anything. So that's always a problem. even with the imbalance that we have right now, where there's more jobs than people, and we've been on the other side of that as well, you still have this issue of did we properly evaluate candidates? Did we actually send them through, or they kind of lost into a black hole? And as a candidate, you very much feel that as well when you take all this time to apply and you never hear anything. So I think getting the right candidates in, obviously from an employer's perspective, they feel like things are moving very quickly, right? Because when you find a good candidate, they're suddenly gone. And that's happened to me recently, where it's like, oh, I can't even move fast enough, because people have other opportunities. And as soon as I even see them, they're already talking to someone else. And so, that is a powerful position for candidates to be in. But a lot of times they do lose out on those opportunities where they just kind of fall into the crowd of candidates, and it's really hard to kind of filter through and find that good match. So they might be getting a job, but it might not be the best one for them, or the one that they really wanted, because of all that noise.
Really great insights, Dr. Lindsay Zulaga, Chief Data Scientist at HireVue. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm Drew Friedman. You're watching Workplace Reimagined on Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more of our program.